Hello everybody and welcome back to LRN. Today we are talking about Alpine and the drivers shortlisted for their second seat next season, who should get the drive, what they've been doing recently, whether they should even be considered, and who at the end, in my opinion, should be picked for Alpine to teammate Esteban Ocon in the Alpine side next season. If you are new around here, please make sure to subscribe on the bottom right hand side. It really helps the channel out, helps the community grow. So make sure to subscribe on the bottom right, get involved in the comments, and let me know your thoughts on who you think should get the drive for Alpine next season. We're going to kick this off though with Hulkenberg versus Giovinazzi. I've already done an in-depth description and comparison between these two drivers, which I'll link in the description below, so I won't go into too much detail with these two. But essentially, if I was to choose between Hulkenberg and Giovinazzi, it would be Hulkenberg that I would go for. I think he's the more proven talent in F1. He's done more in the sport. I think Jovanazi struggled generally against Kimi Räikkönen. And I think really with either of these two, I probably wouldn't pick them. I think that the comparison video I did was for Haas. Who of those two should be picked to go into the Haas seat, and I think that's about the level they should be going in at. I think Hulkenberg is his time as, you know, up in the upper echelons of F1, or chances to be there, have come and gone. So certainly from my point of view, him to come in as a stable hand at Haas, good option. Either Hulkenberg or Jovanazi. You know, Haas aren't going to be there fighting at the front, and I think it's the right place for either of those drivers to be. Obviously, Jovanazi being part of the Ferrari driver program, it makes sense for him maybe to step in, as of course Haas are customers of Ferrari. But based purely on drivers, I think Hulkenberg would be better than Jovanazi at Haas as a driver. But I don't think either of them are up to speed or up to scratch now to step in at Alpine. I think Alpine are better than that at the moment, or at least more exciting an option, and they should be looking at more exciting long-term project drivers to come into Alpine. So for me, Hulkenberg, good option, good short-term option, but shouldn't be considered for Alpine. Same with Giovinazzi. So moving on to Pierre Gasly, we've had the news today that Hulkenberg will not be given a seat or a super license to allow him to get a seat in F1. So Red Bull have given up on their pursuit of Hulkenberg, which does mean that Pierre Gasly most likely will not be released from the Red Bull outfit. They've been very clear they will only allow him to leave while he's in contract if they get an exciting talent. That exciting talent was deemed to be Hulkenberg from IndyCar. He's 8 points short of the super license, so they have given up on their chase for him. They don't want to do anything last minute in the winter. They don't want to have to not be able to plan ahead. So expect Pierre Gasly to remain at AlphaTauri and see out his contract next season. So that takes him out the running for Alpine in 2023. You could say that someone like a Hulkenberg could come in for one season with a view that actually Gasly's the guy that they want. Let's bring him in 2024. Hulkenberg will be a brilliant stopgap for them, proven entity, bring him in. Maybe we'll see something like that. But Gasly is off the table from my point of view, based on what I've heard, what I've read, for next season. So let's see how that plays out. Next on the list of people to talk about was Jack Doohan. Now, Jack Doohan is doing a really good job in Formula 2, 4 wins this season, just really, really holding his own. Obviously part of the Alpine driver program, so he is sort of, if they were to look in-house at their next best driver, obviously Piastri was their chosen one. He was the one who was meant to come up from the driver program in the lower formulas and step into the F1 seat at Alpine. He of course has left them to go to McLaren, and that leaves Jack Doohan as the next one in line to come in and step up into an F1 seat. I think this is too soon for him. I think that a permanent, like Piastri, I think a season as a reserve driver in F1 could be on the cards for Jack Doohan, and then maybe we'll see him in a couple of years' time. He certainly seems like a good talent, but then again, a lot of the drivers in F2 seem like a good talent. It's who they've got managing them, what relationships do they have, that tends to decide whether they get into the sport of F1, or sometimes who their dad is. In the case of Mick Schumacher, that's not a dig at his ability. It's simply saying that he was always guaranteed a spot at Formula One somewhere because of who he was, versus other drivers in Formula 2 who very much have to rely on relationships they've made, or being just crazy good performances that mean that someone has to take a chance on them. So we'll see with Jack Doohan how that pans out over the next couple of years. But I personally would suggest it's too soon for him. And I'd like to see him given a few more FP1 sessions, and maybe a season as the reserve driver before the final decision on whether Jack Doohan gets a drive in F1 is made. I think there's people ahead of him who need a drive in F1 and that are potentially more deserving, but certainly one to look out for the future. Next in the list is Daniel Ricciardo. So if we're looking at Danny Rick, he's obviously a big name in the sport, and it's quite clear that people still like him, the team still like him and see him as a good driver to have. Jack Villeneuve has come out and said that he doesn't understand why drivers are looking at him. He's proven to be slower than other drivers on the grid. Obviously, we know the issues that he's had. And if he was to be chosen by a team, would it be for his name only? I would have to agree. I think it is. I think we're looking at someone who would be picked on his reputation or past reputation, not because of what he's doing in the sport right now. And it's really hard to argue that of all the drivers that we're talking about, that Daniel Ricciardo should be the one to get the drive. I do not want to see him leave the sport, but that is because of his personality. It's because of who he is. He also always has fun interviews. He's a great guy to have around. People love to have him as their teammate, love to have him in their team. He's such a good guy. And as his experience, I'm sure, is invaluable in terms of his feedback to the team, what he can bring in terms of helping them develop the car, and his experiences in Formula One. But his outright pace in an F1 car, and arguably his interest in, his subconscious motivation to go and put on massive performances, maybe it just doesn't have it anymore, and it is resulting in a slower pace, which, we saw so much potential in his early career. I think most people thought he was a future world champion over those first few years of his career, but at this stage I do think that he's probably better served moving on and finding something else to do, because I do not see him getting in a position where he is the number one driver in a title challenging team. Now, he could go and prove us wrong. We know the ability is in there somewhere, but I do think that Ricciardo's time has come and gone. So again, for me, difficult to make him the number one choice to come and partner Ocon at Alpine next season. Next one to discuss is Mick Schumacher. So Mick Schumacher, for me, definitely should be remaining in the sport. You can look at his season individually. Certainly qualifying's been one that he definitely needs to improve, but he has done that over the last few races. I feel like he's definitely stepping up his game. His racecraft has been on point. Really good performances. We saw the overtakes he just did in Monza. I don't know how he managed to avoid an incident into turn one, hot on the brakes. You saw him lock up. He comes off, turns it in, it sticks. So it was great driving there against Latifi, and he's got the talent in there. He's definitely got it. We saw how much quicker he was in race day to Mazepin. We saw actually Mazepin and Schumacher were quite even when they were teammates in terms of qualifying, but then on race day, Mick was just so much better than Mazepin that, that's where his deficit is. It was always in the qualifying, and he was equal with Mazepin, which shows you how bad Mazepin was, that he just couldn't do anything in the race. But Mick, for sure, has stepped up his game. I think he's learning every single race he goes out there, and I think he's proven that he's deserving of another opportunity in F1. I think a better car as well. If he was to get the drive at Alpine, it would probably be his last chance to go and show that he really is a top talent in F1. Because otherwise he risks being, a long-standing mid-card driver in the world of F1, or mid to lower tier. If he doesn't go into Alpine, start outdriving the car, or team of the mid-level team, and start outdriving the car, outdriving their teammate consistently, and showing that they're deserving of a top drive, like what Leclerc did when he was at Sauber, where you just saw that he was just better than the car that he was in. Like Norris is doing at McLaren, where he's just better better than the car that he has underneath him. Alonso, of course, done that throughout his career as well. We need to see that from Mick, I think, in his next move. But I definitely want to see him get a next move. I do not think the time has come for Mick to step away for other people to get a chance. His chance is still, in my opinion, now. And he should get one more opportunity, hopefully in a better team than Haas. And hopefully that could be Alpine. I certainly think he's on the shortlist, but whether or not he'll get it, we will see. But there's another big name in the list who's proven they're deserving of driving F1, and that is Nyck De Vries. And it'd be hard to argue against him getting the opportunity. Now, for me, absolutely Nyck De Vries needs to be on the grid next season. I think what he came in and did in Monza was nothing short of phenomenal. Again, I've done a video on that. I did a reaction video to the Monza Grand Prix that massively talked about Nyck De Vries and his perfect weekend in Monza. And I certainly think he's deserving of a drive in F1. Will that be at the level of Alpine? Does he deserve that off of one performance? Maybe. I think that's down to personal opinion. I think at the end of the day, if he's good enough, he's good enough, right? He's proven to be the case. So would Alpine be wrong for going and giving Nyck De Vries a chance in the car? Absolutely not. Don't think that at all. I definitely think that he would be right, or someone that should definitely be considered for that drive. I think maybe he should be the one to go into Williams and replace Latifi. I think for me, Latifi needs to go. Someone has come in and in one weekend proven they're quicker than him in a car that he's had lots of miles in, lots of practice. It's his car, and De Vries was quicker than him. Someone that's not driven a full F1 weekend before. I think that's got to be it for Latifi. I don't think there's any coming back from that. He's got to go. I've said it for a long time now, but he had to go anyway at the end of the season. But if there were ever needed to be a final nail in the coffin of Latifi's season, it was Nyck De Vries coming in and at last minute coming into the team and outperforming him easily. So, you know, at the end of the race, we saw he couldn't even get out of the car because of how much pain he was in. His shoulders, he couldn't even move them. And he still finished ahead of Nicholas Latifi, who's obviously well-trained, well-adapted, used to the car. He's been there throughout the development of it, and he still couldn't keep up with Nyck De Vries. So I am absolutely certain Latifi will go. And personally, I would love to see Nyck De Vries partner Alex Albon in the Williams next season. Nyck De Vries obviously part of the Mercedes group, so it makes sense for him to go into a car powered by Mercedes and then look long-term, maybe to be a long-term successor, depending on how well he gets on, you know, long-term race to race, maybe to be shortlisted as a long-term successor to Lewis Hamilton. That's how I would expect that to go. But we will see. So for me, he's the ideal candidate to go and partner Albon at Williams. So when you come back to Alpine, for me, Gasly's off the table. Hulkenberg, Jovanazi aren't up to Alpine's level. They need to be looking at a Haas, that sort of level in on the grid. I wouldn't want to see them at Williams. Again, I think Nyck De Vries is the ideal candidate there. So I don't want to see them linked to Williams. I definitely think Hulkenberg, Jovanazi, only one of them can get a place in the sport next season. And if it is, it's got to be at Haas. I don't see them anywhere else. Daniel Ricciardo, I think it's time for him to move on. Nyck De Vries, as I said, Williams, Jack Doohan, not the time for him yet. Needs to do a bit more in F2. Maybe have another season there. Maybe spend a season as a reserve driver like Piastri did in F1. And that leaves Mick Schumacher. Mick Schumacher, for me, is the right candidate to go into Alpine. Because if he doesn't live up to it, then you can make another move later on. You can bring someone else in. You can get Gasly in 2024. I think that season, a season opportunity. Certainly, if that contract issue wasn't an issue, let me make it clear. If Gasly's contract situation wasn't a problem, I would be sat here saying that Gasly is the perfect candidate. I've said it for a while now. Gasly is the guy that Alpine should be trying to get into that team. He needs a fresh lease of life. He needs to get out of the Red Bull family, but they need to allow him to leave in his contract. And right now, all signs point that that won't happen. So because Gasly's not on the table, I think Mick Schumacher is the next best option for Alpine. Let me know if you agree in the comments below. Of the names we've talked about, who would you choose to go into Alpine? And who would you choose for Williams and Haas as well? Let me know what your opinions on all the driver moves for next season and what you think should be happening. But certainly for me, Mick would be the way to go of the drivers we've talked about today for the reasons I've explained. I think he deserves that opportunity. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. You know, I think we've all got, or at least a lot of us have got a soft spot for him because of who he is, and that there's no doubt that there is a little bit of bias there because of his name. But I do also think he's done enough to show he's got the talent to deserve a place in F1, at least be given another chance. Obviously, if it goes the way of Stroll and Latifi, where they just never step up the game, they just never get to the level that you would expect, then I think a decision would need to be made, like it will be for Latifi this season. But I think Schumacher's proven he's better than that. I think he is at a better level than a Latifi. I think to say he's on a similar level to Stroll right now would probably be fair. And that if he can't step above the level of a Stroll next season, then he might struggle for another opportunity. Maybe he'd end up as a reserve driver in the Ferrari program, maybe, or for someone else. But I do think if he struggles next season, wherever he ends up, if he's still in the sport, that could be it for him if he actually manages to secure a seat, because it is looking really up in the air for him right now. But I hope he does. I hope he gets the drive at Alpine, given the names that are currently being discussed. Obviously, if any other names come into the frame, if we get anything changed, I'll be going on here and we'll be talking about that at the time and discussing who should get the seat and discussing all the latest news. So make sure you're subscribed and you hit the bell icon to be notified of all future uploads, because we'll be on here discussing it. And I want your involvement in the community, in the chat, so I can know what you're thinking about all the stories that are going on in the world of F1. But for me, Mick deserves that chance. But anyway, guys, I'm just going to thank you so much for watching today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to smash a like, make sure to subscribe to the channel, and make sure to get in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a great day. Goodbye.